So at the beginning of the Torah service, I asked a question. I asked people to read along when we get to the place with the curses. And as reading along, you determine for yourself which you consider to be the worst curse. The worst of those awful curses. So, what did you find? What did you think was the worst? Yeah, Jeff. Eating the flesh of your children. Yeesh, yeah. Yeah, though I have teenagers, so sometimes, man. Okay, but right, that does rate up there as pretty revolting, I think we'd all agree. Okay, others, what struck you? Yeah, Ellen. Oh, just the whole notion of God closing God's eyes, hiding from the people. Not willing to even see the people. Beautiful. Other thoughts, other ones that stood out. Yes. The land will not produce, right? And that's a perfect complement to the blessings, where the land produces in such abundance that the Israelites are still to be eating the old grain when the new has come in. They will have so much. So the curse is that the land will not produce at all. Won't produce a thing at all. Alrighty, one last thought is to kind of what y'all experience as you're reading, what you consider to be the worst one. Yes. Yes. The notion that the Israelites, when they're blessed, they live in betach, in security, is the word that the Torah uses. But when they're cursed, they don't have any kind of security at all. In fact, the level of insecurity that they experience is such that they can be put to flight by a driven leaf. And this, by the way, is the source for the title of the book, written by Rabbi Milton Steinberg, As a Driven Leaf. Right? All incredibly powerful, incredibly painful curses that the Torah articulates as the consequence for not following through on the Israelites' part of the covenant. And while all of the ones that you mentioned are distressing and disturbing and painful, I do want to share with you that at least in the eyes of the structure of the curses themselves, in the eyes of the Torah, as bad as all the ones that we've just stated are, there is one that is worse. In the same way that the blessings lead one to the other, and that they start with wellness of body in terms of the produce of the land being so abundant, and that they move then to having no enemies will be against them, so that they can then have peace, so that they can then fulfill that which God intended when God took them out of the land, that they should be able to stand upright in the same way that the blessings crescendo to that most crucial one, so too do the curses. The curses crescendo as well. They have a structure and order leading up to what, at least in the eyes of the Torah, is the worst blessing. It starts with, as we put the structure together, with pestilence and diseases and consumption and fever, all sorts of dever, all sorts of plagues that come upon the Israelites. It then goes to famine, as we noted before, to the inability of the land to produce. It then goes to wild beasts running through the land, tearing it up, utterly destroying it. We then move to the sword, and as was noted, even as the enemies of Israel come through with swords, the level of the Israelites' sense of insecurity is such that their enemies don't even need swords. They'll be put to flight by a driven leaf. But if the enemy comes with swords, the curse says, believe me, 5 will give flight to 1,000. And then it goes on. It goes on to describe the total defeat and destruction and desolation of the Israelites, down to the fact that they are reduced to eating the flesh of their own children. How could it get worse? Oh, says the Torah, it could get worse. Because when we come to the end of all of those curses, the Torah adds one more, and that is galut, exile. Being exiled from the land itself. In the eyes of the Torah, at this point in time, within these curses, being thrown out of the land and scattered among the nations, having no place that they can call their own, that exile in the eyes of the Torah is the ultimate curse for the Israelites. And we can understand some of that. For think about the book of Genesis. Think about the promises that God makes to Abraham and then continues to Isaac and to Jacob. What is the promise to Abraham? It has two components. You will have descendants as numerous as the stars, and you will have land. Very explicit. The two promises that God makes at the beginning of the covenantal relationship with Abraham, with the Israelites. You'll have children, and you will have land. And so we understand why it is that the conclusion of these curses is exile, because it's the reverse of what it is that God said that God had promised. All well and good. That's what the Torah, at least here, says. But you realize, folks, what that means. At least for you and I, here right now. It means that we who live in the diaspora, we who choose to live outside the land of Israel, outside of the Torah's decreed promise to the Israelite people, we live in the Torah's version of the worst punishment possible. That's where we live right now, in the eyes of this week's Torah portion. If the worst curse you can bring upon the Israelites is exile, then those who live in exile, technically, are living a cursed existence. Yeah, right. Seriously. Do we really feel, living here in North America, do we really feel that we live a cursed existence? Do we feel that living outside of the land of Israel, that our lives are so spiritually impoverished that we have nothing to offer ourselves, to offer our community, to offer our world? I don't think so. I know there's lots of criticism that has gone back and forth from the earliest stirrings of the Zionist movement about the unwillingness of certain diaspora communities, prominently among them the North American one, to make Aliyah, to come back to Israel. And there's been a lot of criticism as to why it is we don't do so. However, I believe that the criticism is wrong. And I believe that part of the reason why we stay in the diaspora, why we stay in the galut, and why living in the diaspora is not a negative but a positive, is because there are essential lessons that living in exile has taught us as Jews. And these are lessons that we need to hold on to, because I believe the lessons of exile are the lessons that tell us how it is we should be as Jews. I'd like to just share some of those lessons with you this morning. Living in the diaspora, living outside of the land of Israel for as many thousands of years as we've done so, living homeless, if you will, has enabled us to see the world, has enabled us to experience the world, to live in the world, to live around the world. We as a people have a unique claim, I believe, and I don't use that word too often, but I believe we have a unique claim as a people, in that we can say that we have been friends and brothers with people who literally have lived everywhere. When we understand the breadth of Jewish history, when we take in fully what it is to be both Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jews, when we see the range of what it is that we have done, of where it is that we have lived, we understand that Judaism is not provincial, and that a manifest of Judaism that is xenophobic simply denies what it is that we have experienced. We are a cosmopolitan religion. We are a cosmopolitan people. And we have something to offer the world as we have lived in the world. And this sense of homelessness also gives us a certain sense of detachment. It gives us the ability to stand just on the outside, to experience life a little bit on the margins. And living on the margins gives us a unique perspective. I do not think it is an accident that so many Jews in Western history have contributed so much to Western civilization, in part because of this detachment, in part because we exist on the margins and we are never fully settled, secure, rooted, and then narrowed by the rootedness that sometimes befalls people. And in our detachment, we understand one crucial lesson about the world, and that is that what we see, what is not necessarily what was nor what will be. We've been around. We understand that life is all about change. And in the constant change that we have seen and experienced as a people, we have a quest, a desire. We seek meaning. We know that history moves. We know that history isn't cyclical. We know that history isn't frozen. We know that history moves, and we want to know what direction it moves in. And so we commit ourselves to one of those things that doesn't seem to change, and that is the capacity to learn. And we embellish and delve into that capacity. And in that capacity to learn, we seek to understand the world around us, to give it meaning. Hence, we understand why it is that we as a people have always prized learning and books, and that our shrines are filled with them, and our worship revolves around it. Because in that capacity to learn, we have the ability to find meaning. And as a people who have lived in the diaspora, we understand the importance not only of seeking and of learning, but of compassion. We were slaves in Egypt. We were slaves in Mitzrayim, the ultimate exile. And in the ultimate exile of Egypt, we were abused. And that abuse at the hands of someone who had power over us is taken in by the Torah. And that experience in the diaspora becomes the fundamental understanding of the Torah's vision of who we should be, to be compassionate, to be kind. Why? Because we were once slaves in Egypt. We understand the pain of those who do not have power. And living in the diaspora has also taught us the limits of power. Even while we've been abused by those who have held it over us, we understand its limits. That's why the psalmist says human beings are neither God nor animals. We're neither God because we're not fully active. We're not animals because we're not fully fated to a particular destiny. We have a little bit of freedom. Not total, not complete, but we have a little bit of freedom. And with that little bit of freedom, Judaism says, you must do. We can't change the world in a day. We can't change the world necessarily in our life. But our lives as a people, doing the little that each of us can do, can make all the difference in the world in which we live. And because we understand that this world sometimes can leave us feeling lonely and insecure, we understand that change is constant and therefore this is a transitory world, we understand and have learned in the diaspora the importance of community, of coming together at moments like this, to be able to celebrate, to be able to embrace, to be able to learn, to be able to support those who have lost. We understand, living the experiences we've had, how essential it is to have moments like this, moments and places where we can come together to congregate. This is the kind of Judaism of the diaspora. It is a Judaism that has a breadth of vision. It's cosmopolitan. It is a Judaism that is seeking and seeks through learning what it is that is required of us and how we can bring meaning to our lives and the history in which we live. It is a Judaism that is compassionate. It is a Judaism that is engaged. And it is a Judaism that is communal. This is the kind of Judaism that the diaspora has taught us. And I would say, my friends, that this is the kind of Judaism you and I must live each and every day of our lives. Because this is the kind of Judaism that embodies what it is we understand about this world and how it is that if we live this life, if we live with the breadth of vision and don't reject the other simply because they are the other, if we are willing to seek meaning and to apply ourselves intellectually, if we're willing to be compassionate to the people around us, and to engage in the world to make it better, and to understand that we do so as a congregation, and we are all the stronger for doing it as a congregation and not just individuals. If we embody that lesson, we are best able to respond to that lure of God, that call of God, when God first hovered across the waters. When God hovered on those waters and called life into being and continues to call life into being. Our ability to respond to that call is enhanced by living this kind of Judaism. This is the kind of Judaism that we have learned in the diaspora. This is the kind of Judaism that we need to live, but not only in the diaspora, but in the land of Israel as well. And this is the kind of Judaism that when we don't live it, really is the modern version of the exile which the Torah speaks. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.